breaking news.
Hello, welcome back to the International Desk. I'm Lynda Kinkade, and we have some breaking news to update you with. The Pentagon says at least 150 Al-Shabaab militants were killed on Saturday in a US drone strike near the Somali capital. The US says the militants posed an imminent threat to US troops and African Union peacekeepers. For more, CNN military analyst, retired Lt General Mark Hertling joins us now via Skype from Orlando, Florida. Great to have you with us. Just give us a sense of how significant this hit was.
It seems like a pretty good strike, Linda. This is a training camp about 100 plus miles north of Mogadishu. Special operations forces all over Africa are watching these kind of activities on a daily basis. I mean, we tend to focus on ISIS a lot, but the Special Operations Command is in a lot of different places in the world, and to have a strike this big at a training camp that kills this many fighters will be a very good victory for these forces.
Now, the US military says these Al-Shabaab fighters were planning a large-scale attack against both US forces and African Union forces. Just remind our international viewers of what sort of attacks Al-Shabaab have carried out in the past.
Well, they have been famous for generating new types of aircraft bombs. They have used improvised explosive devices in various areas throughout Somalia. They're linked exclusively almost with the warlords. And Al-Shabaab, as we use that term, is an Al-Qaeda affiliate. But they have done some very dastardly things in eastern Somalia, especially around that area, and they've been attempting to thwart some of the African Union forces that are countering Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, which is the northern part of Africa. This strike, though, Linda, I think is pretty significant in the fact that when you think of drone strikes, or when the typical private citizen thinks of a drone strike, they think of a precision strike against an individual or against a car that an individual is riding in. But to have a strike that kills this many terrorists at one training camp, when you're talking about launching from a drone, is very significant and shows a new approach to countering these terrorists in Eastern Africa.
Yeah, that's right. 150 Al-Shabaab fighters killed. Do we have any indication as to how big this terrorist network is?
Well, Al-Shabaab has been around for a while, and they've actually ebbed and flowed in terms of size. There have been some attempts to link elements of Al-Shabaab with ISIS in northern Africa, but it's been anywhere at its zenith. It's been around 5,000 fighters. It has been as few as 2,000, but they have, in fact, have grown back and forth in those kind of numbers over the last several years. They were at one time in the late 90s one of the major terrorist groups in Somalia. They have since connected with Al-Qaeda, and there have been some attempts by ISIS to connect them with them based on their ideology. But yeah, it's continued to be a very dangerous element in Somalia, and the Somali government and the African Union are trying to stamp this and several other terrorist groups out throughout the realm of North Africa.
Now, these militants were at a training camp. According to the US military, they were just about to complete their training before carrying out this so-called large-scale attack. Given what they have done in the past, what do you think they were capable of?
Well, that's a great question. And again, it might not necessarily have been an attack in Somalia. They may have been using the training camp in Somalia to generate a force and then ship it elsewhere, either in northern Africa and, say, Algeria or Tunisia, where we've seen some of the other attacks, possibly even Egypt to support some of the other terrorist groups. Or potentially, you could have even seen the potential flow into Europe and the European networks, as they've been all of the terrorist groups have been attempting to do over the last several weeks.
Lt General Mark Hertling, great to have you with us as always. Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you, Linda.
Well, as the 2-year anniversary in the aviation's biggest mystery approaches, there's a new batch of lawsuits against Malaysian Airlines. Flight 370 disappeared 2 years ago this Tuesday, but closure seems far off. CNN's Simon Mawson has the latest developments.
There's been a lot of movement in the missing plane investigation over the last few days as the 2-year anniversary approaches. First of all, crucially, the Ministry of Transport has now confirmed to us that they are awaiting verification of 2 new pieces of debris which were discovered in Mozambique and Reunion Island. Reunion, of course, is where we found that flaperon, the only piece of evidence and piece of MH370 to have been confirmed to date. The flaperon was found on Reunion Island. Of course, in Mozambique last week, another piece of debris found by a US citizen on holiday there, an enthusiast of MH370. Now, the Mozambique authorities have now handed that over to Malaysian authorities. They'll be bringing that back here to Kuala Lumpur for further investigation. And if they need more tests, they're going to take it on to Canberra and Australia there for testing. Now, aside from that, with the 2-year anniversary comes a 2-year deadline to file for compensation or to sue Malaysia Airlines. Now, families here are very upset about that. They're calling for an extension of that deadline. They're saying this is not the time for them to be thinking about legal proceedings. This is extraordinary circumstances. Well, then please make an extraordinary decision to move on from that 2-year international law deadline. So families are asking for that, and they are launching a petition titled Search On. They're concerned that come the summer, the search, once it clears the 120,000 kilometres that they're searching right now, if they don't find the plane, as already agreed by the governments, they will stop. They're saying, please search on. Many of them still in denial, hoping their loved ones and the plane will turn up.